The sun hung low over the crumbling village square, casting long shadows on the broken stones beneath the feet of restless onlookers. Dust swirled in the air, mixing with the scent of sweat, livestock, and something far heavier, shame. At the center of the gathering stood a wooden platform, old and splintered, bearing the weight of a trembling young girl. Lena, just 18, but her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had stopped hoping days ago. Her hands were clenched tightly at her sides, knuckles white, legs shaking under the tattered dress forced upon her. This wasn't a celebration. This was tradition, twisted and cruel. In this forgotten village, when a man's debt grew too large, he could offer his daughter for auction. And so, Lena's fate was sealed not by her own actions, but by the crushing poverty that broke her father's will. He stood at the edge of the crowd now, head lowered, unable to look up. Perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of fear of seeing his daughter's eyes, knowing he'd allowed this. Men gathered, some already shouting out bids, treating the moment like sport. Coins clinked in bags. Laughter burst through the murmurs. Lena's lips quivered, but she didn't speak. What would she say? Plead? Beg? She knew it would do no good. No one there was listening for mercy. Her eyes darted across the crowd, desperately searching for a face, any face, that might see her as more than a prize. But every gaze returned cold, greedy, amused. It was as if her humanity had been erased. She was a transaction now. The auctioneer, one of the village elders, banged a stick against the wood, silencing the noise for a moment. "She is untouched," he barked, as if selling livestock. "Strong enough for work, beautiful enough for pleasure." The words cut deeper than any blade. Lena's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself barely, still silent, still strong, though every part of her soul felt like it was unraveling. Behind the crowd, a few children peeked around their mother's legs, too young to understand the full horror of what was unfolding, but old enough to feel that something was wrong. Women watched with downcast eyes, some clutching their daughters tighter, silently praying they'd never end up here. But no one moved, no one objected. Tradition held them all in its grip. And yet, even as the first man raised his hand with a jeering grin and a fistful of silver, Lena refused to cry. She wouldn't give them that. She had nothing left to bargain with but dignity, and she clung to it like a fragile thread. In that square, surrounded by shouting voices and silent indifference, a young girl stood at the edge of losing everything. The crowd came to see a sale, but fate had other plans, and far in the back, a man neither laughing nor bidding yet, watched with eyes that held something different, something that looked a lot like mercy. The sun dipped lower, painting the village, square in shades of rust and fire. The auction had begun. A village elder raised his arm and shouted the starting bid, his voice slicing through the thick air like a blade. Coins flew, catching the light mid-air before landing with sharp clinks on the platform below. Men yelled over each other, their voices fueled by pride, alcohol, and the thrill of ownership. Some shouted numbers, others laughed crudely, making jokes at Lena's expense as if her suffering was a game. Lena stood frozen, every shout jarring her body like a slap. She tried not to flinch, but it was impossible. Every raised hand, every thrown coin felt like another piece of her slipping away. Her breathing quickened. Her gaze darted from face to face, searching, pleading, desperate for a break in the storm. Maybe someone would speak out. Maybe someone would stop this. But there was no miracle. until suddenly a man, loud, red-eyed from drink, doubled the current bid. The crowd erupted in laughter and whistles. Even the elder smirked, delighted by the rising price. And then it happened. From the very back of the crowd, beyond the jeering and the chaos, a hand rose quietly. No shouting, no mockery. Just a single, calloused hand lifted slowly into the air. Silence rippled across the crowd like a wave. Heads turned. Even the elder paused mid-sentence. The noise, once deafening, died almost instantly. All eyes shifted to him. He stood apart from the others, tall, broad-shouldered, his clothes stained with the earth he worked. A wide-brimmed hat shaded most of his face, but the sharp edge of his jaw and the stillness in his posture said everything. This man hadn't come to play. He hadn't come to gawk. He hadn't come to bid out of lust or cruelty. He just stood there, silent, unmoving, hand still in the air. Lena's eyes locked onto him, unsure if this was another cruel twist or something different, something real. The elder hesitated, then cleared his throat. We have a new bid," he said, unsure of how to read the moment. Whispers filled the silence. "Who is he? Is that the farmer from the northern fields? He never comes to the square." Lena didn't move. She barely breathed. But inside her chest, something stirred. A flicker, a question. Could this man, this quiet stranger, be here not to claim her, but to save her? She didn't know yet. No one did. But the auction, once filled with noise and cruelty, now held its breath. And in that breath, hope entered the square. Quiet, unannounced, but undeniable. The murmurs spread like wildfire as the crowd slowly parted, eyes wide with curiosity and disbelief. Footsteps echoed on the cracked stone, steady and unhurried. The man walked forward, his boots coated in dry mud, his coat faded from sun and time. He looked like someone carved from the land itself, weathered, strong and quiet. His face was lined but calm, with eyes that held no hunger, no arrogance, just stillness. Lena watched him approach, her breath caught in her throat. She had seen this man before, only in glimpses, plowing the fields on the edge of the village, always alone, always silent. They called him Eli, the silent farmer. Some said he had no family. Others said he'd once had a wife and child, lost to fever. No one really knew. He never came to the square, never joined in festivals or trade. He lived with the earth and asked nothing from anyone. Now he stood in front of the platform, meeting the elder's gaze. Without a word, Eli reached into his coat and pulled out a weathered leather pouch. It thudded against the wooden platform with surprising weight. The elder opened it cautiously, his eyes widened at the contents. Silver coins, copper ones too, some old, some newly earned, a lifetime of quiet saving. Eli looked up. His voice, when it finally came, was soft, unshaken. "I'll take her." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lena's heart stopped. The elder straightened, uncertain. "You understand what you're bidding for?" Eli nodded. Then, gently, he added, "Not as a wife." His eyes flicked up to Lena, full of calm but fierce kindness. "As a daughter." Everything went still. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to quiet. Lena stared at him, unsure if she had heard right, unsure if her body was real, if this moment wasn't just another cruel trick. "A daughter?" the elder repeated, as if the word had never been spoken here before. Eli nodded again, folding his hands in front of him. "She doesn't belong to anyone, but she deserves better than this." The elder looked around at the crowd, unsure whether to scoff or to applaud. The other bidders lowered their heads, shamed without being told. Even the drunkard stepped back. Lena's legs gave out, not from fear this time, but from the release of something too big to name. A tear traced down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. No one clapped, no one cheered. But something shifted. In a square built on silence and cruelty, one man's quiet mercy had broken through. And in that moment, a girl who had nothing was given back everything, not as a prize, but as a person. The first rays of morning stretched across the horizon, bathing the small farmhouse and surrounding fields in a soft golden light. The earth was damp with dew, the scent of soil and spring drifting through the air. Birds called lazily from distant. Trees and the world, for once, felt still, peaceful. Lena walked barefoot through the field, the earth cool beneath her toes. Her dress was plain, her hair tied back, and a light layer of dirt smudged her fingers. She didn't mind. In fact, she liked it. The feeling of being grounded, connected to something that asked nothing of her, something that grew from care, not cruelty. Beside her, Eli moved in quiet rhythm, dropping seeds into rows he had prepared at dawn. His hands were steady, his movements practiced. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice was always calm, always patient, gentle. "Fingers," he said once, kneeling beside her. "The seed needs space, but also the promise of warmth." She looked at him, unsure at first if he meant the soil or something more. But then she saw it in his eyes. Not pity, not sadness. Just understanding, quiet and kind. Eli never asked questions about her past, never pushed, never touched her, even when she stumbled or cried in the night. He gave her space to feel what she needed to feel, to grieve what had been taken from her, and to trust again on her own time. Every day she rose with the sun. She fed the chickens, learned to knead bread, helped tend the fields. At first, her hands trembled with every task, but slowly, steadily, they learned to create instead of defend, to hold instead of hide. Sometimes, when they paused for a break, beneath the willow tree near the field, Eli would pour her tea, rough hands cupping the chipped mug like it was something precious. He never said much, but one phrase always came, like a lullaby wrapped in certainty. "You're safe now. You always will be." And she believed him. The nightmares came less and less. Her smile, once fleeting, started to linger. She laughed, for the first time in months, when a goat chewed her scarf and refused to let go. She began humming as she worked, and one morning she braided flowers into Eli's old straw hat, placing it on his head with a giggle. He didn't flinch. He wore it all day. The farm wasn't grand. The house was small, but it was enough. More than enough. Here, on this humble stretch of land, Lena wasn't a price to be paid or a burden to be hidden. She was a girl with dirt under her nails, sun on her skin, and a future stretching wide like the rows of crops she helped plant. She was growing, and in that quiet, steady life, Lena was learning to belong again. The fields were alive with color. Golden wheat swayed in the breeze. Baskets overflowed with apples and squash, and laughter danced through the crisp autumn air. The harvest celebration had drawn the whole village, a tradition that once brought only stories of survival, but this year it brought something more: healing. Lena stood near the center of it all, no longer the trembling girl from the auction block. Her dress was handmade, simple but clean, and her hair flowed in loose waves down her back. She moved through the crowd with grace, passing out loaves of fresh bread, jars of preserved peaches, bundles of herbs. Children clung to her skirt, giggling, chasing each other through the hay. Their joy was loud and unburdened, exactly as it should be. Eli stood a few steps away, leaning against a wooden post, chewing thoughtfully on a stalk of wheat. His eyes followed her, quietly proud. He hadn't changed much in appearance, but something in him had softened. A crease in his brow replaced by peace, a weight lifted from his shoulders. As the sun began to lower and the crowd gathered near the long harvest table, Lena stepped forward. The murmuring softened. People turned, curious. They knew her story, or thought they did, but they had never heard her voice like this. She took a breath, and for a moment the year flashed through her mind. Bare feet in the dirt, tears on her pillow. The first time she'd laughed again. The first time she called him Papa without hesitation. With a clear, steady voice, she began. 1 year ago, I stood in this village, afraid, alone, and ready to disappear. I thought the world had forgotten me, that I was nothing more than what I could be sold for. The crowd was silent now, even the children still. But then, she continued, her voice trembling only slightly, a quiet man, one who owed me nothing, raised his hand, not to own me, but to free me. This land saved me, but his heart made me believe again. She turned to Eli and wrapped her arms tightly around him. He held her, strong and still, as he always had. She looked back at the crowd. One act of kindness can stop a lifetime of pain. One person, just one, can change the story. There were tears in more than one pair of eyes now. Some looked away, ashamed. Others nodded, humbled. But all were moved. That day, as the sun set over full baskets and full hearts, the village remembered what it had forgotten for too long. That compassion is stronger than tradition, that dignity can be restored, and that sometimes the quietest hands sow the deepest change. Lena had come full circle, not just rescued, but reborn. And Eli, the silent farmer, had done what no coin ever could. He gave her back her life.